Good evening and welcome to the City of Topeka Planning Commission meeting. We are a commission appointed by the mayor and city council to plan for the orderly growth and development of the community, to hold public hearings, and to make recommendations to the city council on planning items. Please note that the city council rules state that the public hearings for all planning cases shall be conducted solely by the planning commission. No additional public hearings will be conducted by the city council. Tonight's cases are tentatively scheduled to be heard by the City Council next month. Agendas can be found at topeka.org. For cases that require public hearings, the procedures will be as follows. First, the planning department staff will summarize the case. Next, we will hear from the applicant or their representative. Then we will receive public testimony. Public comments should be addressed solely to the chair and are limited to 4 minutes. Chris, please take the roll.
Mr. Armstrong?
Here.
Mr. Dean?
Here.
Mr. Freed?
Here.
Ms. Herron?
Here.
Mr. Kanar?
Here.
Ms. Messina?
Here.
And Mr. Warner?
Here.
All right, Ms. Ringler is not logged in yet, and Mr. Kalp will not be here, but we have 7 for a quorum.
Thank you. Item B, approval of minutes, June 21st, 2021.
I would make a motion to approve.
Mark Freed will second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, Chris, please take the roll.
Mr. Armstrong?
Aye.
Mr. Dean?
Aye.
Mr. Freed?
Aye.
Ms. Herron?
Aye.
Mr. Kanar?
Aye.
Ms. Messina?
Aye.
And Mr. Warner?
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0 with none abstaining.
Item C, declaration of conflict of interest, ex parte communications by members of the commission or staff. Hearing none, we will move on to item D, action items. D1 721/05 by Fred Royce, requesting to amend the district map on property located at 1115 Southwest Wanamaker Road from O&I 2 office and industrial to C4 commercial district to allow a restaurant with drive-through service. I believe Mr. Risley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is Z21-05. This is a proposal to change the zoning of the 0.51 acre site from O&I 2 to C4. I apologize, it has me on the back end of my slides. The property is located near the northwest corner of Southwest 11th Street and Wanamaker Road. The proposed rezoning is to accommodate the development of a restaurant with drive-through service, although restaurants with drive-through service can be met with C2 zoning. We have received no opposition from neighbors or the public. The balance of the block is currently zoned C2 to C4 commercial. Surrounding the property is undeveloped R1 to the west, C4 to the east, C2 to the north, and C4 to the south. Staff is recommending C2 and not C4 because C2 zoning is sufficient for the proposed use. C4 zoning would allow for other less desirable uses to potentially accommodate the property along Wanamaker in the future, and C4 allows for larger signage than C2. The recommended zoning and land use are in conformance with the comprehensive plan and fit the surrounding physical character. And as stated before, staff is recommending C2 for approval, and this concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Questions for staff, commissioners? I guess I'll start with a question, Mr. Risley. Was there a traffic study requested? I know we had information sent to us after 5 o'clock that looked to be part of a traffic study, but without any actual analysis. So what was the purpose of that information, and was it part of a traffic study that we didn't see?
Bryson, if you want, I can respond to that question. I was pretty involved in the pre-application on this. A traffic study is a typical requirement when you have a drive-through restaurant or any drive-through operation. That is not typically a requirement prior to a zoning application, especially if it's just straight zoning and not a PUD. So the staff has not had a time to review the traffic information that the applicant provided tonight. But a TIA, traffic study, will be required either prior to or part of a site plan review application after zoning is established.
Thank you, Mr. Hall.
That clears things up for me too. I was going to ask the same question as Mr. Armstrong. Are we supposed to take into consideration all the information that we got, or are we just looking at the rezoning right now? And that answers that question.
Mike, could you be willing to take that one?
Is another question?
Yes.
I missed that. I'm sorry.
Mr. Hall, this is Commissioner Werner. You pretty much cleared up my question too. We received all that information, site plans and a traffic memo, about a half hour, 45 minutes ago. And it was a little confusing because I know we were just looking at the rezoning tonight. And usually that information goes in the site plan review, which you cleared up. So.
Yeah, some of what was submitted by the applicant tonight is part, I believe he wants to present in his presentation tonight.
Okay.
Commissioners, any other questions for staff? If not, Mr. Kalhoff, are you representing the applicant this evening?
Yes, I'm representing the applicant. I'm here with John Platten, who is my partner, and he'll be the co-developer for this as well. I just wanted to address some of the questions that you asked. When we did the neighborhood information meeting, someone had asked about a traffic study, and we believed that we would have the complete traffic study at this time. And so we were going to present that if we had it. They did not have it completed, so we just wanted to provide what we did have available to us. Same with the site plan, that was not required, but they did ask just to have kind of a rough overview of, to give you guys an idea of what we were proposing for the site. So just wanted to provide what we had for you. I'm gonna actually introduce John Platten here. I'm actually gonna have him maybe talk a little bit about this opportunity and kind of what we expect it to bring for the city of Topeka and for the employees and just kind of the excitement around the brand. I'm not sure if this is John being.
Sorry about that. I was muted. John, you didn't give me any warning. That's okay. I was, just by way of background, not sure if it's relevant, involved in Sonic Drive-In. I developed and operated 21 stores, which I sold a couple of years ago. I'm involved with Seven Brew because I had always thought if I saw the right opportunity, a really exciting opportunity to work with really good people, I would be back in the beverage restaurant business. And Seven Brew is a really good company. It's from Northwest Arkansas, so right down the road. It's been developed by local Northwest Arkansans, and then part of it was purchased by Jamie Coulter, who's from Wichita, former Pizza Hut, founder of Lone Star Steakhouse, and Jimmy John, I can never remember his last name, who founded Jimmy John Sandwiches. Really good restaurant operators and known not just for their restaurants, but for their cultures and their people, which is really which is obviously a big part of every business. And John and I wanted to get involved with it because of the culture and the focus on the people. This will be a double drive-through beverage store, high volume, fast speed, and high quality is what the brand is known for in Arkansas, and that's what we will do in Topeka and some other locations. You may be familiar with a company called Dutch Brothers, which is out on the West Coast. They're also expanding around the country, and it's a segment of the business that's focused on beverages. It's a pretty young demographic market, and we sell a lot of different types of flavored coffee, iced teas, even some shakes and energy drinks in a really fun, friendly family atmosphere. This is, however, obviously it's car business, and this location we really like, but we will be getting, our business is people in cars, and we've asked for C4 zoning because the larger sign we have, the better people will see it. The more business we will do, the more we'll pay our employees, and the more tax revenue we'll generate. I do think this is a kind of a toss-up between C2 and C4, and I can see both sides of it, but I don't see a big downside to C4. So I am, and I know John will ask that you consider a C4 zoning. And Mike, I'm pretty sure that I am quoting you accurately. Really, there's not much difference between C2 and C4 other than the size of the sign allowed. And of course, there are some less than savory uses that could be, that could utilize the property under the C4 zoning. We fully intend to be there for the next 40 years. So I don't believe that would be an issue you guys will have to worry about if you did zone it C4. And I think that's all I have. We're really excited about this, everybody.
So I got a question for either John and I mean, I know we're not in a site plan discussion here, but you said dual drive-through. I did look at the site plan you sent. Does it go counterclockwise?
Yeah, it'll go counterclockwise. And the way they have it written up, I think they actually have cars in 3 lanes. That is an opportunity, for peak times. Most of the times we're kind of anticipating using that middle lane as a bypass, something that'll help speed up traffic flow. So essentially, rather than waiting behind the person who's always in front of me, who got 7 drinks, I can get my 1 beverage and I can go through the middle lane. So that's something that will also help with the flow of the property.
Sure. All right. Maybe a question for staff, Mr. Risley or Mr. Hall. Could you maybe take us through the sign differences between C2 and C4 and what that looks like in that decision-making process?
Yeah, I can do that, Mr. Chairman. So the difference in signage, it's not so much of a size difference. It's more of a height difference. So there's a baseline height standard in the C2 district of a maximum of 15 feet. And where that 15 feet comes from is that's high enough for a sign to be seen over the top of vehicles. So if you consider that a vehicle has a height of probably 8 feet, typical vehicle, maybe a lot of vehicles have a height of, less than 6 feet. That's adequate to have the sign project above the height of the vehicle. That's kind of where that 15 feet comes from. So when we developed the sign code, I think there were a lot of people that like the idea of monument signs that don't exceed a height of 7 feet, but we gave strong consideration to the practicality of having a sign that was tall enough that it could be seen over shrubs and vehicles. So that's where the 15 feet comes in as a baseline in the C2 district. There is also an opportunity to have a taller sign if the sign is set back at least 10 feet from the front property line. And in that case, the sign can be as tall as I believe it's 20 feet in the C2. Yeah, it's 20 feet maximum in the C2 district. So compared to the C2 district, the C4 district, the baseline maximum height is 25 feet. And with increased setbacks, you can have a sign as high as 30 feet. So those are the key differences between the C2 and the C4 district as it relates to signage. And then as the applicant mentioned, there are some uses that are allowed in the C4 district that probably not good uses for that stretch of Wanamaker, not really a desirable use over the long term. Not likely to happen in the near term, certainly, but things like used car lots and heavy auto repair are examples. Another consideration is the size of the site. The site's pretty small. It's not really conducive to C4 development for the most part. So that's really the reason for staff's recommendation. I want to point out also, Culver's recently developed one lot to the north of this site, and it's zone C2, and they got a sign permit for a 15-foot tall monument sign, and they did that. They didn't really have they didn't express any concerns about that. To be fair, they did originally apply for a taller sign than that, but we advised them that they couldn't get a permit for anything taller than 15 feet unless they set it back, and they just went with the 15-foot tall sign.
Would you guys allow me to share my screen?
Sure.
I sent some information over here earlier, and I apologize I didn't have that over to you sooner. I was kind of putting all the pieces together here from the different parties this afternoon. I included some pictures on there, and I think this is pretty, I'm not exactly sure what the zoning was maybe when these things were put into place. All the commissioners and I think staff probably have a picture of this, but if you look at the signage that's in that area, and you can pull it up on Google Maps is what I did, and you can actually just look down the street and see what you can see. So the building just north of our property is Cox Communications, that's zone C2. And from 100 yards away, their sign is completely invisible. But the US Bank sign that's exactly across the street, which is about 3 times the size, is clearly visible from that distance. And I tried to include that in the packet there. I actually have, the sign company got back to me here just a little bit after I sent the information over with kind of some mock-ups. These aren't going to be exactly to scale, but they are enough maybe to give you an idea of kind of the differences based off of the sign company's calculations for what will be allowable with both the C2 and the C4 zoning. I'm going to try to pull that up here for you. Okay, sorry about that. Okay. So this is kind of just a rough mock-up of what they expect that C4 signage to be. And just to contrast that with the C2. So you can see there's a pretty pronounced difference. And again, in that document, I'll pull some of that up here as well. You know, this is C2 zoning at Qdoba and Jimmy John's. And I don't know how tall this sign is, but it sure as heck isn't 15 feet tall. You know, this sign has great visibility from the I-70 intersection. And so, you know, I'm not sure how the zoning and the signing regulations were in the past. It's clear that's something that was either grandfathered or something like that. But this is the zone that we're trying to develop in. And I think it makes sense for us as developers to have signage that is consistent with that area. This here, you can see the Cox, you can't really see, but that's the Cox communication sign. And this is the US Bank sign that's across the street. So if you can kind of just envision those two monument signs that I showed you for 7 Group, this is kind of the real world effect of how that looks once you build that sign and how visible that is. We're also, as you can see, the power lines are on our side of the street. So we're kind of put at a disadvantage just by some of the physical barriers that we don't have any choice but to work around that. And you can also see, I'm not sure if it was clear from the presentation, everything on this east side of Wanamaker is C4. Everything south of our site is C4. I kind of just did a quick screenshot of some of these maps here so you can see this. So this would be the Culvers that is C2. On this area, this is that Cox Communications. And of course, this is the last O&I in that stretch. But you can see the C4 is pretty predominant throughout this area. Even these PUDs are predominantly C4 zoning. So the Starbucks, for example, to the south here, that's going to be C4, as well as Home Depot and all the other restaurants to the east there. You know, going further down the corridor, this is 29th Street, Topeka Boulevard. There's a Scooters at this location. I kind of did a little write up on some of these other locations as well, but there's a Scooters at this location. That's also C4. Again, you can kind of see that this whole busy corridors are predominantly C4 zoning. 29th Street, we've got Wheatfield Villages, PT's Coffee is in there. That is a mixed use, but I could not tell from the map, but I believe that the commercial piece is C4 as well. Again, that whole area, 29th Street and Fairlawn Road is C4. And we are back on Wanamaker here. This is, I guess, just kind of showing more of that corridor. There's obviously that section kind of in between 21st Street and maybe 25th, where it's more residential, or there's some institutional type of stuff in there as well. But getting back into the business district, we're predominantly C4. I believe, again, this is some PUD, so there's a mix in there. But just kind of showing, I guess, what we're asking for. Again, the mall area, predominantly C4 to the east, and the mall is also C4. So I guess I feel like what we're asking for is pretty consistent with the area, even if, you know, the zoning example here on the Qdoba and Jimmy John's, this is just north of that Culvers, you know, it kind of, whether it's in people's mind, the size of those things, I think, lend some importance to them. And when you have a bunch of monsters next to you, if you don't look like a monster, I think it's easy to get forgotten. I can't speak to why Culver's didn't, push harder for that type of zoning. But I can tell you that their sign gets hidden right behind this Cox Communication sign when you come up from the south. And so, that's something that we don't want to happen to us. We want to be able to be seen. We want to make a lot of sales, and we want all of our employees to make a lot of money. And I think this is what we think gives us the best chance to do that for ourselves and for our employees. Did anybody have any questions? I know I did kind of a little bit of write up, and I don't want to just read that to you word for word, but I did just kind of want to present this information. And just John and I are both here if you have any questions or concerns for that.
John, I do have a question back to your mock-up that you got from the signing company. And maybe this is a joint question to Mr. Hall, but where is that 10-foot offset calculated? To me, it looks like your sign is offset 10 feet. And if that would be in the 20-foot allowable zone, maybe that's a compromise that would work and still get the C2 zoning in place.
Part of the issue is not just with the setbacks, but also with the sign size. So there's kind of a complex calculation on that. I wish I could tell you that off the top of my head. Maybe Mr. Hall can, but there's kind of a matrix. While you do get some benefit from in sign size from being pushed back, you also are further away from the street and less visible. So that, we really don't want to make that trade-off. We want to be seeing, if you look at this map, I don't know what the setbacks are here, but you can even see it on, excuse me here, on this, where you look at the Pi 5 and some of these restaurants, those restaurants are they're actually further out. Those buildings are in our right of way. We're not able to build that close to the street. And so they kind of create a visual shadow going down that corridor, certainly from the south, when you look down that line. So we really want that sign as close to the street as we can get it, and as tall and as big as we can get it. I'm not sure. There's actually a big water line that goes right along that frontage, but for some reason it must not, the right of way at that area must not be as far west as it is at the subject property here, because there's quite a setback due to that water line.
Yeah, John, you mentioned why some aren't conforming on the corridor. We have worked the last 3 years with staff on signing code updates, and to get signs that are appropriate with lot size and building size and use was a part of that overall program. So moving forward, we're trying to abide by that new signing code. Things that were done in the past are hard to undo, but I'm just thinking a little further south. I don't know if Starbucks even has a sign, and I'm sure I get to Starbucks every time I need a coffee, and it's not easy to get to. I understand why you're pushing for as much as you can get, but.
Mr. Chair, this is Corey.
Hey, Corey.
I had a question for Mike on the Qdoba sign specifically. It's kind of big and seems a little too big, but on that new sign code, don't those get grandfathered out after a certain amount of time, or they're going to have to change that with a certain number of years?
Yeah, I think it's 20. I believe it's 20 years.
Was it 20 years? Okay, I didn't know.
And if they modify, if they alter the sign, they have to either come into full compliance or they have to reduce the height and size incrementally if they alter the sign. That doesn't include a reface of a sign necessarily, but an alteration of a sign.
Okay. I couldn't remember what the year was for that. Thank you.
I can tell you what it is. The year 2039. So it's 20 years.
I think we might be open to having a sign just like Qdoba's, and we'll change it in 2039 if that's an option. No, I did pull up the Starbucks sign here. They do kind of have just a tiny monument. And we're not Starbucks and we don't want to be Starbucks. Just to be real clear, we've got kind of a completely different business model. We obviously have no name recognition at this point. We expect that to change really rapidly. But really advertising and visibility, that's really going to be our lifeblood. This is going to be the first 7 Brew in Kansas. We're anticipating there's a couple other franchisees, but we anticipate just with the timeline we're on, we're going to be the first to market. And we want to do it right. We want to make sure that it's successful. We just want to kind of give it every chance for success. I can kind of walk you through this quarter. I don't know if that's relevant or not, but you can kind of see the just visually kind of how some of these signs. So Academy obviously has a monster sign. There's each of these. The Five Guys has a smaller monument, as does McAllister's. Here, obviously, you can kind of see Spangles again. That's a C4. The Quick Lane C4.
We're not seeing your screen, John.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's stuck on a Starbucks map.
I'm sorry. Okay. Let me. Oh, do you know what? I'm sorry. I got to change windows here. I'm so sorry.
I think most of us drive this corridor, if not daily, weekly, for quite a while. So we're, I think, very familiar with everything there.
Yeah, I understand that, but it's just, you know, even I do as well. But just actually seeing the way some of these things sit, I think is kind of, you know, without paying close attention to it, it kind of fades into the background after the 5th or 6th time you drive by. So, you know, the Pi 5 and McAllister's have that. They've got the big Academy sign here, Dick's and so forth. I did pull that. I'm sorry. The Starbucks has just kind of a tiny monument here on the street, which is probably just wasted concrete as far as that's concerned. But you can kind of see the Cox Communication sign a little bit in the background there, if you know it's there. And again, kind of just contrasting that with US Bank again, with that C4 zoning and signage permissivity. Is there anything else, I guess, that anybody wants to see? Obviously, you can see all this is C4. They've got really, really good signage on all these properties across the street. So we're just asking to be zoned as such so that we fit into that neighborhood.
Mr. Hall, probably just off topic for the corridor here, but I guess across the street, what was, I assume it had to be C4 zoning for the new collision attorney sign that just went up the last week or so?
Yeah, I can't remember exactly what that sign looks like. I would have to research to find it, but I believe what they had was an existing non-conforming sign and they refaced it. That's my recollection anyway. Does it look like more than a reface?
Yeah, it's giant. Commissioners, other discussion?
Yes, this is Commissioner Warner. I had one more question for Mr. Hall, just to confirm once again. If they set that sign back 10 feet from the property line, they can make it 20 feet tall. Is that correct?
If it's 10 feet back, they'd be allowed to go 17 feet.
17, okay.
Yeah, if they set it back further than that, they could potentially set it back far enough that they could go 20 feet.
Okay, 20 is the max, okay.
20 is the max in the
All right.
C2.
So if they go 10 feet back, they can get to 17 feet.
Yes, at 10 feet, they would get to 17 feet.
Okay. And I'm just looking at their site plan, and you know, there's a green area on the north side and the south side of their large driveway centered on the site. It probably goes back 15 feet to 20 feet on their drives. So there is an opportunity to put that there and get a few more feet out of this, and still be within our new sign ordinance, which we, like Commissioner Armstrong alluded to, that we spent a lot of time working on and implementing over the last couple of years. So I just wanted to find out how high they can go and see what will work.
But just to be clear, so the signage that we want is, I mean, as I said, I think if you read the staff report, he said either C2 or C4 zoning would be appropriate for this area. And the signage that we're requesting is allowed in C4 zoning. And that's why we're requesting it as such. There's nothing that would be non-conforming about our signage within that C4 zoning.
Right. And I understand that. There's just a few other things that he mentions in the staff report that come into play here, like lot size, and that whole row of C2 zoned lots that are similar in size to the north, including the Culvers, which is the most recent redevelopment or new development of a site in that area. So I think they're basing it on that, and I think that's the point I'm trying to make also.
What is the setback required to get that 20-foot height?
One more, I can answer that. I just need a little bit of, I need to do a calculation here.
While you're doing that, Mike, I just wanted to clarify on top of what you're looking up. I believe staff's recommendation is C2, just to be clear in the staff report. Is that correct, Mike?
That's correct.
Okay. I thought I heard it could go either way.
So if you set the sign back 15 feet, you can get a height of 19 feet. If you set it back 20 feet, you can get a height of 20 feet.
Mr. Chair, if I can ask a question for John.
Sure.
John, have you guys considered putting a sign up on the building itself as well to attract attention?
Yeah, there's going to be signage on the building, but again, the issue is that there's a water line. So instead of the usual setbacks, I think we're going to end up getting pushed back an additional, it's almost 10 or 15 feet, because in addition to the setback, we have to have a certain, the water right of way. We have to be a certain distance away from that water line. So that's pushing us, I think it's, and Mike, I'm not sure if you remember, it's about 10 or 15 feet away from the what would be the natural setback on that property. So certainly we'll have some building signage, and I can certainly present some of that and show you what that will look like if that's helpful. But again, it doesn't really accomplish what we want to do. We want to be visible as possible from as far away as possible. And we want to have that C4 zoning just like the properties across the street to the south. That's how we accomplish that.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'll just let you know what I know about the water main, because that affects the setback of the building. It actually also affects where you install the sign. So the water main on my map, on the GIS map, is about 27, 26 feet back from the property line. And I don't know if the applicant has the water main. I see. The applicant has a water line easement of 25 feet behind the property line. Does that sound right, John?
That does sound right, but I believe when we spoke with the gentleman at the water department, they said we also had to be 10 feet away from where the physical water line is.
Where the actual water line is, okay.
Yeah, and so if I remember correctly, it sits like 1 or 2 feet away from that west border of that easement. So
I don't know if the applicant was aware of this, but the city actually will not approve, I'm pretty sure will not approve a freestanding sign in a water line easement. Which means the sign is going to have to be set back behind the water line easement and a certain distance from the water main. Yeah, I think I can see that. Of course, this doesn't necessarily, it's not a fact that supports staff's argument necessarily for the zoning, but it is a fact that, I think it's worth considering, just to be honest. I mean, the applicant's going to be pretty limited about where they put that sign.
And I was certainly not aware of that. I guess I'm just curious that it seems like that Cox communication signs probably on top of the water line. What is the,
Yeah, that's, yeah, that is interesting. I don't know what happened there. And Mr. Chairman, that's not something that the planning department necessarily restricts. That's more of the utilities department. And so, you know, maybe they allow exceptions in some cases, but I think in general, freestanding signs are not permitted in utility easements.
Yeah, going down that corridor, I don't know if I see any in that. I can't get Culver's because it's not on Google Earth yet. Oh, Cox definitely would be the closest. No, well, yeah, or yeah, I guess I don't know if it's a monument sign or what it's defined as.
I just wanted to address Mr. Theander, I believe you asked about the C2 versus C4. In staff's report, it said C2 or C4 zoning is a better fit than the current O and I2. That's what I was referencing there. I wasn't trying to mislead anybody on that.
I'll just chime in because we've got a little newer aerial. It does look like that water line does go through pretty much where the culvert sign is. So Mike, I'm not sure what's going on with utilities and approvals of signs. So we may want to parking lot that until we know more and we can get with them.
Right.
Commissioners, further discussion?
I'm not sure if I feel comfortable voting if we don't know that information. Just because I would err on the side of C4 if they cannot get a sign there. And if they could, I would err on the side of C2.
I think for me, I think it's a great thing. I'm really happy you guys are coming in here with this. So I think personally, I would prefer seeing a smaller sign just because I really like the Qdoba signs kind of just seems out of character. But and it looks like even if you have to push it back past the right of way, it'll be up to 20 foot also. I know there's some places along Wanamaker where the sign's so big it actually blocks the building, and the building has a bigger sign on it. So it's something to kind of look at your angles too when you're looking at it. But anyway, I'm happy for the development, but I prefer C2. But we're talking about 5 feet basically.
Chair, I have a question for Ms. Feeney. As we're discussing all this, and I mean, I don't know that there's any members of the public that want to testify, but we've got that yet. But while I'm looking at it and saying I think C2 might be the more appropriate zoning, I'm not sure legally that's really our question here. The question is whether or not C4 is appropriate, since the applicant is holding the line that that's what they want. And under the golden factors, I think unless there's a reason to exclude it, that it would be that we should approve it, even though we might also feel that C2 is more appropriate.
I'm not following you. You mean just because the applicant has requested C4 doesn't necessarily mean that the board has to either recommend C4 or nothing at all?
I'm not suggesting that we have to recommend it. I'm just saying if they've applied it at C4, if C4 is appropriate, it seems that we should approve it. The fact that C2 would also be appropriate, I don't know.
But I think staff's recommendation is that C2 is appropriate.
I'm aware of the recommendation. I'm also aware of the application, and they're simply not the same. And so the standard for reviewing the C4 application seems to be whether or not it meets the golden criteria.
Well, yes, that's true. If you apply the golden criteria and you believe that the C4 request is appropriate, sure, you can determine that you can recommend C4 to the governing body. Now, let's not forget to have the public hearing. Okay, just don't want to forget that. And maybe there are people who wish to speak to this. The other question that I had, Mike, is how was this noticed up? Was it noticed up as C4 or C2?
Is noticed up as C4.
Okay. And C2 is more restrictive than C4?
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay.
So I guess I misread the agenda. I didn't read these as public hearings this evening. They're not listed as such on the agenda. If it is a public hearing, we will have one.
Yes, it should be. Mike, it is a public hearing, right? You noticed
it is, and we noticed it that way and advertised it that way, I believe.
Okay.
It might not say that on the agenda.
All right. Well, we are long past getting to that then. And with that, we will open the public hearing. We would ask if anyone from the public would like to speak, that you limit your comments to 4 minutes. Is there anyone with us this evening that would like to speak to this? I also don't see anyone from the public on our call. All right, hearing none, we will close the public hearing and back to discussion.
Mr. Chair, if I may just clarify, I think Commissioner Kennard was kind of getting to this point, but just so all commissioners know. So in our rules, we advertise it the way it was applied for. As Mike said, it was applied for C4. We do the analysis, and if we come back and say, you know what, we think C4 is not appropriate here, and that C2 is, and it's a more restrictive district, which it is, you as a planning commission can make that change or adopt that recommendation. You can't go up, meaning if we were to say, oh boy, this is a great I1, and we think it should be I1 instead of C4, you'd have to go back through and re-advertise the whole thing and have a whole new public hearing. We just couldn't do that. So you can go down in intensity when you do make a recommendation, just so you know, and you don't have to re-advertise. I don't know if that helps clear anything up, but that's kind of what's happening here.
Mr. Finder, can you address Commissioner Messina's question about would we be better off getting clarification on signage within a waterline easement and how we're going to enforce that throughout the corridor or not?
We can. I know it was an issue of sign and building when we did the academy development. That was that was complex. They arrived at a solution. So Culver's being the new one in there, yeah, I think we can track down utility review of a potential sign in that easement and near that water line, and we certainly can get that information. If it's important, if it's a factor that, you know, again, is the basis for part of our golden factors and part of the basis for the recommendation, we certainly can provide that. It will have to delay then the case another month if you want to go that way.
I guess a question to the applicant, what's the critical path of your development and moving forward?
We would sure prefer not to have this delayed another month. You know, certainly we're going to work with whatever utility easements are there. Obviously, if we put our sign on top of a water line and it breaks, you're going to tear it out. And I'm going to have to put it up again, and probably in a different location. You know, I would say the issue that we're going to get into is if we get this forward now, we can potentially get it done before the end of the year. If it gets delayed a month, it's not going to be before the end of the year. It's probably going to be the middle of next year, because we're going to have, you know, we're assuming we can find the construction and the construction staff and the materials to do that this year. We think we've got that in line, but I would not be excited about a delay. I would say it would likely also, Topeka would not be the first one developed in Kansas on that time frame either. I don't know how important that is to Topeka. I think it's cool, but I don't know that that's life or death for either you or I.
Mr. Chair, let me understand this. The issue is whether a sign can be placed in a utility easement. Is that what we're talking about?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, well, utilities is not going to allow anything in the easement absent an encroachment agreement. Now, utilities may be able to agree to allowing the encroachment into its easement, but the agreement would, you know, essentially say, if the city needs to get to its water line, we're going to rip up your sign and we're not going to pay you for it or nothing. But that possibility does exist. It's going to be completely within the discretion of the utilities department to decide whether they're going to allow a sign to encroach into the easement.
Thank you. Commissioners?
Chair, I have, I guess, one more question for staff. If they had been willing to recommend C4 rather than C2, would they have put conditions on that? There are none listed with the C2 recommendation.
Are you, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Kanar, you're asking if staff would recommend approval if there were C4 with conditions?
I'm not, I understand your recommendation is C2.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm saying is that, are there conditions that would have been put in if C4 had been the recommendation? Was that even considered and just as an option?
It was not considered because that would be conditional zoning, and we really only approve conditional zoning through a planned unit development application. And we didn't advise the applicant to apply for a planned unit development application.
Mike, it's a half acre size as well. So
yeah, so PUD is not an option.
Can you clarify for me? You said you can go down but not up. So theoretically, the commission could approve either C2 or C4 at their discretion. Is that correct?
They could approve C4 or anything below that. Yep.
which would include C2, right? Okay, without renoticing and, okay, so we're okay.
And again, maybe a question for staff. This recommendation goes to the governing body. If they would choose to think that C4 isn't appropriate, does it come back to us for re-review, or can they make a down zoning on their own at the governing body level?
They could make a down zoning on their own. They need more votes. They need 7 votes to amend your recommendation.
Thank you.
I have a question. So, Mary, that means if we recommended a C2, they could also go up to a C4, or because we make the recommendation, then they can no longer consider the C4?
No, they could consider the C4. They just need 7 votes as opposed to 6 votes.
Thank you.
Maybe you can help me clarify on that process. If I don't agree with the recommendation of the planning commission, will I have a chance to make my case in front of the city commission?
No, you will not. I mean, you can certainly, if you want, you can certainly lobby the governing body members, and then they would have to disclose that they had a communication with you and that they are still able to make a decision based upon the evidence presented to them, which is everything that has occurred during this planning commission hearing.
Just to be clear, there is no opportunity to stand in front of the body and make that case.
Correct.
Okay.
Excuse me. I just wanted to say one other thing. If we were to receive the C4 zoning, we would attempt to work with the utilities department on an encroachment agreement. I've done it before, and that's how important it is to us. Not sure it could be done, but we would try.
I guess I'm just going to fill the silence because there is silence. I spoke with Mr. Hall about this when we did our pre-application. This is the only variation that we want from essentially what the C2 allows, is the size of that signage. I made the offer, and apparently this is not common practice, to essentially rezone it again back to C2, allowing for the essentially grandfathering that sign in, which I can tell you is not well received. But the signage is really, really important. I guess I just want to make that perfectly clear. I'm open to really any changes after the fact that don't interfere with the signage. We don't want it to be an auto body shop or heavy machinery or any other undesirable uses. But the fact of the matter is, if they want to do that, they can do it right across the street, and they're not going to use the site anyway because it's too small. So I guess that that sign is really, really important. We're open to creative solutions. I'm not aware of any other creative solutions, but it sounds like even if we rezone it back to C2, there is some sunset on that signage size based off of the Qdoba discussion. Again, we're expecting to be there for 40 years, and that's probably 2 comprehensive plans in the future and a lot of who knows what between now and then. So I guess that's, I'll end with that. Thank you.
Commissioners?
I'll just jump in. I'll say I think the C2 is consistent with the properties of similar size. I think the signage is consistent, that we're talking about is consistent with the signage nearby them to the north. I think signage in relation to the size of the lot is important to me. I think that was kind of part of the point of what we did with the sign ordinance. So I'm inclined to follow the recommendation of the planning department and going to C2.
I've been looking at this on Google Earth, just going up and down the road here, and like the U.S. Bank sign was pointed out as one that shows up well, but I mean, just looking like I'm measuring it, I think it's actually less than 20 feet tall. So it could be what they could do with a C2. And then if you put a taller one there, then it's kind of going against where we're, with the Culvers and the Cox, it would look a little out of whack, I think. But so my gut feeling would also be to go with the C2. Also, if you look at the Qdoba sign, it's so high, it's into the wires more too. So that's something else but so.
Commissioner Freed, is that a motion?
No, I thought we were just asking for the discussion or comments. So I
Okay.
made a motion at this point.
Do we have a discussion after motions are made?
We will.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion. Based on findings analysis of the staff report, I move to recommend to the governing body approval of the requested to reclassify the property from O and I2 office institutional to C2 commercial district.
And I will second.
Motion is second. Further discussion, commissioners? I guess I will weigh in. I am looking up and down the corridor, also on Google Earth now. As long as the encroachment easement can place the sign within the same area as the others along the corridor, I tend to agree that based on the size of that lot, that 15 to 17 foot sign based on that size of property, I think that seems appropriate, and I don't think anyone from the interstate is going to find coffee on Wanamaker from driving through. So, but believe me, I think it's a good location, and based on the traffic volumes and the amount of coffee drinkers in this town, I think it will be a great location and very successful.
Chair, Commissioner Kanar, I think it's appropriate either as C2 or C4. I think I guess that's 11th Street there would be a more natural break. Transitions are always going to be tough when we're going from one to another. I guess it's just my general mindset that if the applicant has put in for C4 and that it meets the golden standards, that I would be inclined to approve it, even though I wish their application was under C2.
Commissioners, any further discussion? Hearing none, Chris, I believe the motion is for approval of C2 as recommended in the staff report. Please take the roll.
Mr. Armstrong,
Aye.
Mr. Dean,
Aye.
Mr. Freed,
Aye.
Ms. Herron,
Aye.
Mr. Kanar,
Okay.
Ms. Messina,
Aye.
and Mr. Warner.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes 6-1 with none abstaining.
Moving to item D2, CU 21/02 by Manuel de Jesus Paredes, requesting a conditional use permit to allow for used car sales on property zoned X1 mixed use district on 1319 Southeast 6th Avenue. And I don't know who from staff is taking this.
Mr. Chairman, I'll be making this presentation.
Mr. Hall,
And Chris will be pulling up the slides before I begin.
could you clarify if this is a public hearing or not before we start, please?
This is a public hearing.
Thank you.
And the applicant, I believe, is here, or a representative of the applicant is here. Okay. So this is an application for a conditional use permit to operate a motor vehicle sales lot in an X1 district. Next slide. Staff is recommending approval. Subject to the site plan and the statement of operations. Car sales, this is a car sales lot on a very small site. The site is less than 1/4 of an acre. The adjacent uses, the Salvation Army Community Center is to the north. There's a church to the east that I can't pronounce. There is a single family residence on the adjacent lot. It's under the same ownership. To the west, there's commercial beyond that. And then to the south, it's single family residential. Next slide, please. So the property, as I mentioned before, is zoned X1 mixed use district, and much of the corridor along 6th is zoned X1. The city downzoned this property and others along 6th in 2002 to implement the East Topeka neighborhood plan from C4 commercial district to X1 mixed use district. Auto sales requires a CUP under the X1 zoning. The site and building has an interesting history. It was originally a gas station. The story is that Bonnie and Clyde, back when they were doing their run through Kansas, actually stopped and bought gas at this gas station and arranged to buy a car, the one that they were killed in, ultimately. And more recently, it was used for tire sales. Next slide, please. This is an aerial photo of the site. This is from 2020. It's actually changed since then. Much of the building that you see on the site has been demolished. And then there's a 2019 photo on the right there of the site. Next slide, please. So, basis for the recommendation, there are a lot of good things about this. Actually, when the city downs on this to X1, I think a big part of that was to try to mitigate or control a lot of the auto storage that was occurring on 6th Avenue, a lot of the auto-related businesses that were not really a good influence on 6th Avenue for a lot of reasons. So car sales wasn't necessarily an encouraged use with the change in the zoning, but there's certainly a lot of positive aspects to this proposal. As you notice from the earlier slide, currently there's a really wide access directly off of 6th that is something that a traffic engineer just does not like, and most other people don't like them either. So that's being closed. There's a lot of concrete that's being removed and replaced with landscaping. There's a deteriorated brick sidewalk on Lawrence Street that's being replaced with a new sidewalk. The existing building, the one with the history, is being preserved, or it'll be retained at least. The car display area is enclosed by a decorative metal fence, and the site plan and the statement of operations limits the number of vehicles displayed for sale to 10, and does not allow for auto repair and long-term storage of inoperable vehicles. Next slide, please. This is the future land use map from the East Topeka Neighborhood Revitalization Plan, and based on the rationale provided in the staff report, the proposal is largely consistent with the neighborhood plan. A lot of that's because of the improvements they're making to the site and protections for neighboring property owners. Next slide.
It's done.
That's done. That concludes my presentation.
Commissioners, questions for Mr. Hall?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have a question. So, Mr. Hall, that house that's to the west, that's not part of this property.
That is correct.
But if I look at the plan, how far from that house, if I read it right, there's this fenced in area in the middle of the lot. Is that correct? It'll be on the west end of this lot?
The fence will be on the property line.
Okay, and how far is that from the neighboring house?
Well, I will take a minute and look at the GIS map, which is something that I'm able to do because we're doing this by Zoom. It'll take just a minute and I'll be able to do that.
Mr. Austin, can you answer that from the plat we have up here? It looks like it's the driveway plus a few feet.
Yeah, I heard a question about the separation to the nearest house. Was that the question?
Yes.
It is. I don't have the exact distance, and I'm not sitting at my computer, but we're talking probably in the ballpark of 15 feet from the property line to the next house to the west.
Thank you.
That looks right. That looks right to me. When I look at our map, it's pretty close to that.
Yeah, I was looking at the layout in the handout. That seems correct. Commissioners, other questions? All right, I believe Mr. Austin is representing the applicant this evening. Mr. Austin, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Hall presented a lot of the information I was going to present. The applicant's done everything that the staff's requested in terms of redeveloping this site. It's not going to be a high use, high intensity site, but it will give the lot in the neighborhood some purpose and generate some sales tax revenue for the city. It's a good fit for the neighborhood. It is a mixed use zoning, and I believe it's appropriate. So we're just looking for support from the Planning Commission on that so the applicant can get moving forward with this project.
Thank you. Commissioners, questions for Mr. Austin? All right, hearing none, I think it makes sense for the area, and based on the limited number of vehicles and hours of operation, and given the historic nature of the property, it seems appropriate to send it back to its original use. For discussion, or I would entertain a motion.
Is this a public hearing?
Yes, it is. All right, let's go ahead and open the public hearing. We will entertain comments from the public. Each speaker, let us know that you're here to talk about this agenda item. You'll have 4 minutes to respond. Is there anyone on the call this evening wishing to talk about this agenda item? All right, hearing none, we will close the public hearing. Commissioners, further discussion, or I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that based on the findings and analysis in the staff report, I move to recommend approval of the governing body of the conditional use permit subject to the conditions listed in the staff report recommendation.
A second.
This is second.
Sorry, Mr. Dean. Sorry.
Motion and a second by Mr. Kanar. Any further discussion? All right, hearing none. Chris, will you please take the roll?
Okay, we'll call from the bottom up. Mr. Warner,
Aye.
Ms. Messina,
Aye.
Mr. Kanar,
Aye.
Ms. Herron,
Aye.
Mr. Freed,
Aye.
Mr. Dean,
Aye.
and Mr. Armstrong.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
We'll move on to item D3, CU 21/03 by Kansas Sand and Concrete, requesting a conditional use permit on property presently zoned I-2 Heavy Industrial District and located along the east side of Northwest Stena Court, north of Northwest 25th Street, to allow for manufacturing processing type 3, portable sand and concrete mixing plant. I know we've had a public hearing on this before. Will we have another one, staff, before we get started?
Mr. Chairman, the applicants actually requested that this be deferred indefinitely because there's some disagreement they have with staff about whether a conditional use permit should even be required. Staff is, I have met with them and explained that to them, and they actually have the option, if they disagree with our interpretation of the code, that they can appeal that. At this point, we're recommending approval, and I believe they're in agreement with the conditions, but they have some concerns about going forward without giving more thought to their options. And I apologize, I thought you were informed of this, but that's where this stands is they're requesting deferral and that be taken off the agenda tonight, and they'll let us know when they want it to go back on the agenda.
Well, they only have one more month to hear all my geotech report questions, so they need to hurry back up.
Okay.
All right, consider it deferred. We'll move on to item E1, presentations, Valley Park Plan, Neighborhood Plan, SORT funding. Mr. Risley?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Give me 1 second. I will get that pulled up. Okay, so yes, this is an introduction to the Valley Park Neighborhood Plan. Kind of touch base on some of the stages of resource targeting information as we start out. So what is SORT? SORT stands for Stages of Resource Targeting. Here we have some of the general information about this program. So it provides infrastructure and housing dollars to one neighborhood in that SORT timeline. And for this one, we are looking at Valley Park. So we have $1.7 million in infrastructure projects we will look at for the neighborhood, and $330,000 in housing rehabilitation funds that are through HUD. The general timeline is 2021. We work on the neighborhood plan with the NIA and members of that community. 2022, we'll get into project design, and then hopefully 2023, we'll be looking at implementation. Digging in a little bit further into that first year, we held a kickoff meeting in March. That was via Zoom. We had 9 members of the community who were present. Then throughout the spring and summer, we've had an additional 5 meetings with our SORT planning committee. We're hoping to have that final meeting in early September, and then come back in September for planning commission again. Ooh. Sorry about that. This is the planning area for the Valley Park neighborhood. It's bound by Southwest 21st Street to the north, Southwest Randolph Avenue to the west, Southwest Shunga Drive to the south, and Southwest Washburn Avenue to the east. The elements of a neighborhood plan. So this was the first neighborhood plan for Valley Park. We had to really work to build this from scratch with members of that community. There's really 5 main parts that make up that plan. There's the neighborhood profile. So that's the history, existing conditions, demographics, and trends. We work with that SORT planning committee to develop a vision for the neighborhood and then some goals. We've also begun developing a land use plan or a future land use plan for that neighborhood. Then some revitalization strategies and implementation. The revitalization strategies and that neighborhood profile are a bulk of the plan itself. So that's really where a lot of the meat is for that document. Some history for the neighborhood. Prior to the 1950s, as you can see on that photo to the top right, this was an undeveloped land. It was known as Romig's Dairy Farm. And then following World War II, when there was really that growth period, this was really built out. And you can see by 1959, that's pretty much the same existing character of the neighborhood currently. Throughout development, Washburn Avenue and 21st Street were unpaved. So this really was a big change to this part of the area, the neighborhood. And then in 1951, a dam was built because of flooding issues with the Shunga Creek to prevent any future flooding events in the neighborhood and farther downstream. Then in 1966, tornado essentially jumps this neighborhood. It takes out part of the VA campus that's to the west and jumps the neighborhood for the most part and lands back in Washburn's campus. In 2007, again, there was a pretty significant flood event that did cause damage to homes in the neighborhood. This is the 2020 health map update. The Valley Park neighborhood aligns pretty closely with the census block group 1611. So that information is pretty accurate for what they have there. The information that goes into the health mapping is the percent of persons below poverty, per capita Part 1 crimes, average residential property values, single family home ownership, and boarded and unsafe structures. All those variables are put together and we come up with one composite map. And this was the first time the neighborhood had had a healthy rating since 2007. So digging into those health indicators a little bit further, the largest contributing factor to the increase in the health score was the drop in the percent of people below poverty. Other factors on this table were generally the same from 2017. There wasn't a whole lot of change. I did also highlight those average residential property values and single family home ownership. Those have remained relatively stagnant since 2011, and in some instances have been dropping since 2007. Through these neighborhood meetings, members of the community have kind of tied these two variables to the encroaching floodplain and floodway, and they think that that is causing people to move out of the neighborhood and maybe not invest as much in their homes as they would have previously. The following 4 slides are going to cover some of the existing conditions in the neighborhood. We're going to look at housing, infrastructure, owner occupancy, and crime. As we look at these maps, typically the darker the color, it indicates a worse score. So we go in parcel by parcel and build a block score for different segments of the neighborhood. These are then averaged out across that block to give kind of block by block scores. As we look at housing, the average residential or the average single family home value was $67,500. 68% of the units are single family. There are some significant multifamily properties along Southwest 21st Street. So those are the ones you typically see in NA or commercial or institutional or multifamily uses. So again, it's 2/3 single family housing stock. And as we go through and look at each individual property, there were just under 1,300 deficiencies found in the housing stock. The majority of those were minor and not what we consider a significant deficiency. Infrastructure takes pavement conditions, curb and gutter, and sidewalk scores and combines those to kind of build this map. As you can see, 21st Street tends to have no defects or minor defects, and the single family areas tend to have intermediate infrastructure conditions. This is primarily due to the fact that there is complete infrastructure along Southwest 21st Street. You have the fairly new curb and gutter, the pavement scores were relatively good, and there is actual sidewalks there. Much of the neighborhood lacks existing sidewalk infrastructure. It's primarily around Stout Elementary School on Washburn Avenue and then Southwest 21st Street. Owner occupancy. As previously mentioned, the neighborhood health slides, we're seeing a decline in owner occupancy, and that's been a drop of 21% since 2003. Again, it's believed that this is largely a floodplain issue, but as you can see from this map, there are still some blocks that have greater than 50% owner occupancy, closer to Shunga Creek than some of the other areas that have kind of that 30 to 49 area. So that may not be the whole picture for this. And then crime, as also indicated in the health score, there are some areas that have higher rates of crime. Those tend to be around commercial or multifamily properties. But generally speaking, the crime rate compared to other neighborhoods, this is a relatively low crime neighborhood. Key issues. So the big thing here, and I've touched on it a few times, is that floodplain. As you can see, a significant portion of this neighborhood is in the regulatory floodway, and there's another significant portion that's in the 100-year floodway. This has kind of been a focal point for the residents of the neighborhood, and they know all the challenges it presents, and they're trying to make sure we understand them fully. Currently, there are also very few vacant lots in this neighborhood, so there isn't as much of an opportunity for new infill housing. That floodplain does impact how rehabilitation dollars can be spent, as well as rehabilitation on your own. So that makes it challenging. And then regarding infrastructure, there is a levee project that's being discussed currently. It will not impact the 100-year floodplain. That would protect against a 10-year flood event, but that would not adjust the 100-year floodplain. Goals of the plan. Overall, the goals are to engage with members of the community of Valley Park and attain that community buy-in for the plan. We've kind of had a lot of discussions and heard their concerns throughout this, and I think they're getting that we're really, we understand that floodplain is a big concern. And that's why, another goal is to improve the housing conditions outside of the floodplain by focusing those rehabilitation dollars in those target areas. Additionally, there are some roads that have some low scoring pavement conditions. And so we're looking at those as potential projects for infrastructure to raise those scores. And then overall ensure Valley Park maintains its healthy health rating. Future land use. At this time, we're kind of a tentative look at what we've proposed. Only change would be to take that parcel from commercial to a residential medium density use. Then we have the composite map. So the composite map is taking the housing, crime, owner occupancy, and crime data, overlaying that information to really see what the blocks are that are struggling. As you can see, it's kind of throughout the neighborhood, and some of those are outside of the floodplain as well. So that's something we want to focus on as well. And then taking that composite map one step further, we look for strength and anchors in that neighborhood. Those are in red and yellow. Anchors are the staples of the neighborhood that are the long-term community investments that draw people in. Strengths are blocks that have relatively strong scores, or underachieving blocks that have the ability to revitalize relatively quickly. We use all of this information we have to begin identifying 3 to 5 block areas where we can target those sort dollars as the primary investment areas. And this is the intent there, is to kind of create a blooming effect, where if we have concentrated investment, if we can get those blocks to turn over and become healthier, then we can hopefully see that start to expand out from these locations. Apologize. Building off of that, As we developed these target areas, we did take into account the floodplain, knowing how those rehabilitation dollars would need to be spent. So we really tried to keep those north of 24th Street to make sure we captured as many single family homes as possible to really make sure we maximize that program. There are there's a lot of rental properties in these areas as well. And so those are also eligible for rehabilitation dollars. And that's with that renter occupied program, which brings $15,000 per household. Next steps. So we're tentatively planning for an early September neighborhood-wide meeting where we will bring infrastructure projects to the neighborhood to have them vote, as well as unveil the full neighborhood plan to them and have them or comment and vote on the neighborhood plan. We'll allow them time for public comment between now and that next planning commission meeting, and then hopefully be back September 20th. And that is all I have. I will take any questions at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Risley. I do have a couple questions. Just one slide back, that target area selection. So in past years, we've invested in infrastructure, in streets and sanitary sewers and alley repairs. We're focusing improvements with this neighborhood on how entirety, and what does 30,000 per household mean to those areas?
Yes, thank you. To answer the second question there. So with the housing rehabilitation funds, there are two different kind of methods that money is spent on owner occupied properties and then those renter occupied properties. Those owner occupied properties are eligible for $30,000 in housing rehabilitation. Again, that money comes from HUD, so there are some other things that are tied to that. But that is essentially going to bring that home up to HUD standards, whereas the renter occupied tends to focus on exterior improvements, so HVAC, roof, windows, things of that nature. And then back to your first question there, Mr. Chairman, there still is plenty of projects to spend that $1.7 million in infrastructure funds. We just thought it was really important to ensure that we continue with what SORT has done, and that's the targeted investment approach. So trying to make sure we are capturing as many single family homes as possible. That goes in conjunction with those infrastructure projects as well. So we will target those around the three target areas, but that is still a big portion of this as well.
Thank you. My second and last question, back on the key issue slide, we talked about regulatory floodway and we talked about 100-year floodplain. What are the impacts to homeowners as far as requiring flood insurance, and what defines that, and how much of an impact is that to a homeowner?
My understanding is that if you are in either the regulatory floodway or the 100-year floodplain, you are required to have flood insurance. That's something that the neighborhood has touched on, and we know that that's driving up the cost of living in this area as well. It seems that there are some homes that have allowed that to lapse, and if you go to get a new rate for flood insurance, it tends to go up. So we've worked with the neighborhood and kind of put together a resource packet from some different resources, whether it's FEMA or other areas that tend to flood more frequently outside of Kansas, and put together some resources there for who you can contact for flood insurance in Kansas, or what are some best practices for making sure your home is a little bit more flood resistant. I won't say flood proof, but flood resistant. And I apologize. Did I miss anything else there?
No, thank you.
Okay.
Commissioners?
Question. Given that there's an elementary school there and you said there's a lack of sidewalks, have they discussed whether or not that would help maybe draw in more single family, younger families if they saw that there was the ability for children to walk safely from the homes to the school?
We have had discussions with the neighborhood about that. So to be completely clear about this, so this parcel, can everybody see my mouse? This is Stout Elementary. On the south side, there is sidewalk. It does not connect anywhere besides North Long College, and that also ends at the edge of their property. We have discussed this with the neighborhood as something that we would like to see and encourage for the neighborhood. We are tentatively proposing that along College, south of the school, so connecting to Shunga Drive, where there is a trail where kids can access underneath a bridge in Quinton Heights Steel neighborhood, and then leading up farther north on College towards 21st Street. We have encouraged that as something we would like to see. Wholesale, I would not say that sidewalks are something they have been as interested in as the roadway or pavement improvements. There were some concerns with maintenance and how things like that go long term. My understanding is the neighborhood is also growing a little bit older, and that's part of their concerns with that as well.
Thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions, commissioners? Well, thank you very much, Mr. Risley. Looking forward to this coming back in September after your final public meeting with the residents. Mr. Finder, communications to the commission this evening?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have one that I don't know that you're aware of, so I thought I'd bring it up. We can send something out on it, but the statewide planning conference is going to be in Topeka this year. Some of you in the past, I think, have had a chance to go to this. We'll get something out, but it's going to be here October 13th through the 15th. Staff is doing several sessions. It'll be held at the Cyrus Hotel, and we'll see if there's any interest. Seeing it's in our backyard, I think it'll be a little more cost efficient to send people, but we'll send something out and see if there's any commissioners that would like to attend. I think there's a commissioner's rate, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe they did away with that, but very exciting to have it here. It hasn't been here since 2010, I believe, something along those lines. So we'll update everybody and let us know if you have any questions. Thank you.
I did see from last month, 8 iron therapy is now open in the 29th and Croco area. Seen them advertising already? Yeah, that was passed. They're open for therapy, whichever club you want. Which led me to remember whatever happened to the indoor golf facility behind Hy-Vee that we approved many a day ago. Yeah, and is Mike still on here? I don't think that has come through I know it hasn't come through for any approvals, but I don't know if Mike has an update on that.
I do not. I haven't seen anything. I was wondering that myself. I think I don't think they ever actually submitted any permit applications that I'm aware of.
At one point, they had a big piece of machinery out there, and now that's not there anymore. But that was a while ago.
Yeah, they did some grading without doing what they needed to do to get approved for grading. And I think that was just a mistake. It's an honest mistake, but.
I will also mention that there was some press about a pretty big development out at the Kanza Science Education Park, and one that you approved rezoning for 130 odd unit, 55 and over apartment complex. That had stalled, that was being built, that had stalled. They had reached back out to us about a month ago, and they are explaining what happened. They got caught up, as many folks did, in some of the escalation of costs and shortage of materials. and had to go back and redo all their financing. So anyway, long story short, I believe we have approved their new permit to continue to go forward. I have not personally been out there, but I know they were supposed to be making or continuing on that after about a 6 or 7 month hiatus. So that was that's good news. That's a real, and they actually have told us that is for the Midwest, that is their showpiece. That is they love the site, and that's going to be their model for all of their Midwest. This is a national firm. They've got a couple dozen of these complexes throughout the country. So we're excited to see that. And last thing we're not excited to see is there's one more month that you have to put up with Chairman Armstrong, and Commissioner Ringler is not on tonight. So you get one more chance to put up with her as well. No, we are busily scrambling to fill those positions, but those are huge shoes. So we will be shedding a tear here in another month. So just a heads up. Thank you.
It's virtual for our last meeting, or are we going to all convene in the quarters for one last time?
I'm afraid the way it's looking, we might have to be like this. We can't give you a hug or anything.
I may request virtual anyway then. Hey, one last thing. I drove by 6th and Fairlawn. Any progress on Holiday Inn into apartment type place?
Yeah, great question. That was also one that you rezoned a while back to get it to a multifamily zoning, so they could repurpose that for apartments. That deal fell through. The owners stayed with it, and they're doing it themselves without a partner, and they certainly have the wherewithal to do it. And so they've come back to the city excited. I think they're going to be seeking incentives, probably an IRB or whatnot. They're not really in an incentive area, but the IRB is possible. So yeah, I would expect to see something on the council agenda maybe in this fall for that incentive. That will be a good sign that they are moving forward.
Birdie told me it's being actively worked on.
Yeah, they're looking for some people that would like some old mattresses and hotel furniture. So if you know anybody, you might want to give them a buzz.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it. We'll see y'all next month.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.